All right, we're here in our second episode of Sand Country Legends, and we have with us today Mr. Steve Brown, Mr. Sand Country himself, and a legend. And Steve, I think if my memory and knowledge is correct, you're now the oldest living Brown.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And just a footnote before we start with Steve Brown. Our first podcast was with Gunnar Watson, and when we interviewed Gunnar, the next day he was headed to Buffalo, New York to try out for the Buffalo Bills. He did try out. He did very well, but he did not make the team. And he is back home now, and he's accepted a position with the Taylor County Board of Education as a football and baseball coach. We're very happy for Gunnar. He's very happy. He's very content. And many people have asked me, well, how did Gunnar do with the Buffalo Bills? Well, it didn't work out so well, but it worked out for Taylor County because he's making an investment back to the county that made such a big investment in him. And, that's kind of where we'll start. Steve, I know that all of your life, you and the Brown family have made a tremendous investment in this county.
Well, we've been here.
Right.
I've never been away from Howard more than 17 days in my life. And that was back in March when I was in the hospital in rehab.
I got you.
I've been right here going and coming.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. Let's go back to, I think, 1903.
Yeah.
And by the way, with the sale of Butler Sand Company, I think it's first time in some 125 years that a Brown has not been involved in the sand.
That's correct. We'll take that back. Let's still
Neil is
working.
no longer owners. Brown Brothers was sold some years ago, but Neil is still in the industry. Very happy for him and his wife, Darlene, and his two boys, Tyler and Tanner, and their family. But I think there were 5 Brown brothers, right?
That's right. There was William, John, Rod, Lewis, and Oce were the 5 original.
Okay.
And the way they got started, I don't know. They say that they played hooky from school one day and there was an empty rail car up outside the road. So they just, for the fun of it, filled it up and left. And then the depot agent built it out, thought it was the folks out of Birmingham that had loaded it and was wanting to go there. When they got over there, they said it wasn't theirs. So he had to check back and finally come back and check that the Browns done it.
Right.
It's a prank.
So
and they decided then they got paid for it. That sounded like good going business.
And history is the rest is history. Right. So Steve, your grandfather was Lewis Brown.
Lewis, right.
And Ada Brown.
Right.
And your father was Carl Whittington Brown.
That's right.
And your mother was Claudia Lee Clark Brown.
Right.
And Carl was an only son, correct?
That's right.
And so let's talk about Carl and Claudia Brown. Tell us about them.
Okay. Like I said, I never been away from Howard no more than these few days. But I worked my dad the whole life, and I never been away from him in more than a week in my entire life. I worked with him, and he come and went after he got older, sort of semi-retired. He was a sort of a jack of all trades. He liked to piddle. He built. I think he built Neil and the boys a go-kart out of a lawnmower and something else that had a little engine on it. He had to crank it up. And they had a good time on it.
And don't I recall a Ferris wheel?
Yeah, he built a Ferris wheel and he built a merry-go-round. The Ferris wheel, I'm going to have to come back now. Jerry Daniels was visiting Greg one weekend and got at the end of his finger popped off by putting it in the bill.
I remember. I was there. So as a kid, there were many fun times in Howard.
Oh yes, goodness.
Many fun times. And I was more the age, a little bit older than Greg. I think 2 years, and just had some great times. Steve, we're here at historic Mizell, and I just want to digress a minute. I think my parents moved up here from Crowell in 1948.
I think that's what Austin had told me before.
Right. My dad had returned from World War II, and
Yeah.
my grandparents on my mother's side, the Kilbys, lived at Crowell at a place called the Mathis Place. And they moved up here with mom and daddy in 1948. As I understand it, it was like we just as may as well been from Idaho somewhere, because
Yeah.
we were not known, and the Gwynns were not native to Howard or this end of the county. But with emotion, I can say that the Clarks and the Browns, Gwynnettes, accepted us as family.
It was all, everybody went to church, you know, it was one big family.
That's right. And we didn't say, and I'm going to talk about our next door neighbors, the G family, which May Clark G was Big Mama, Claudia Brown's sister. It was Uncle Bill and Aunt May and Uncle Quentin and Uncle Clinton and Aunt Lucy. And that's just the way it was. And that was my life. I have two older sisters, Ellen and Kathy. They were pretty much gone to college or married when I really came along. But just a great time.
Yeah.
And rich memories of the things that we got to do. And I wouldn't trade anything in the world for it. And
It's been a wonderful life.
It has been a wonderful life, and it continues to be a wonderful life. We're so blessed. We're blessed by a good Lord that takes us and takes care of us on a daily basis. And growing up, go ahead. Do you have something?
I just had one thought just crossed my mind. I saw in the paper last week where they don't cut the trees down on Courthouse Square.
Yes, sir.
And your daddy planted them trees.
Well, I didn't know that. I'm glad
he did.
I'm glad to let you
When
know.
he became forester of the county, he planted.
I didn't know that. I'm glad you told me that. Nothing is forever, and I understand why they're cutting them down, because they're old and undermining the ground there. I understand that. But 1954, I think if we look here. By the way, if you haven't bought a copy of Fall Line County, Taylor County, Georgia, the history, published by Stan Brown and some others, I want to read something to us right here, Steve. I don't know if you read it, but I'm going to just jog our memory here a minute. Talking about Howard. The Howard Community Club was organized in 1953. Each family paid 25 cents in dues. A 4th of July barbecue tradition began on July 4, 1954. Families donated the meat and stew ingredients. An open pit was built in Carl Brown's backyard. Lewis and Marjorie Watson supplied the cement blocks. A cabin near Carl Brown's pond was the barbecue site for 2 years. Howard celebrated 45 years of July 4th barbecues in 1994. Fred Brown designed and built the community's B-Day parade float featuring a church replica with a bell on top. Mabel Brown rode inside the church and rang the bell. Betty G. Magruder, Fred Brown, and Kathy Gwynn Mathis stood at the door. The float won first place. You remember that?
I remember that.
So
I still got pictures of it.
Yeah, I think we got pictures somewhere too. Let's talk about I want to move on in a minute and read some more, but let's talk about the 4th of July barbecue. Whose idea was that? How about?
I think originally the Clarks got together on 4th of July just as the sort of family reunion.
Right, which are your mother's people.
Yeah, mother's people. And then they come along and we had to build Sunday school room on the church about that time.
Right.
We had come off the charge with Butler, and then it became a charge of Howard and several other churches, Union, Wesley, Mark, Sharon. And it was just they got together working on the Sunday school rooms. They enjoyed it so much, that's the reason they wanted to build a community house. I went with them to Rupert, and we tore down the the ACL Railroad Depot down there and brought the lumber back and built.
I didn't know that. It's good to know.
It come from the depot at Rupert.
Right.
8th, 9th grade, somewhere along there.
Right. Well, you know, the 4th of July barbecue became world famous.
Yeah.
And by the time it ended, you know, nothing, as we just said, nothing is forever and everything runs its course. But my goodness, people knew of 4th of July barbecue from every state around.
Yeah. Roger Ann Streetman wrote an article and put it on the Macon paper.
Right.
And the AP picked it up, put it statewide, that no pig was safe in Howard.
That's
We had folks from Atlanta come down to eat, and we didn't have nothing left to eat.
that's right.
They done sold it
That's
off.
right. I remember, Steve, growing up, Mama's job was to, I'm sure other ladies in the community
Yeah.
did so too, but for the Brunswick stew, I don't know if it's a secret recipe, but it was the best Brunswick stew you ever put in your mouth. But her job was to boil hens
Right.
and pick them.
They different families, ladies in different families
Right.
boiled the chickens and picked them, and then they brought it to the community house and ground it up to go in the stew along with everything else.
That's right. And I can still remember, and I don't know if I was with my father or he went for several years, and if I was just there spending the night with Mitch Watson or David G.
Yeah.
or whatever. But I can still hear in my mind and in my memory the chopping of that barbecue. I mean, it made a noise on a wooden table that you can't shake.
Yeah.
And I don't want to shake it.
Yeah.
I want to remember that the rest of my life. And Dale Parks, Billy Parks, Clinton Clark, Carl Brown, David Green would always.
Yeah, David would come.
David Green.
Sometimes he would come cook fish for us.
Yeah.
while we-
First cousin.
Yeah.
David Green was your first cousin. And my dad and Bill G. I tell you, it just was a community of people that were movers and shakers in this community. And we're better off and we're richer because of those people.
One thing that just crossed my mind.
Yes, sir.
Your daddy was in service,
Uh-huh.
and he was helping cook out there one 3rd of July, and he went to sleep, and somebody started shooting firecrackers, and he thought he was still in the war.
My goodness.
And it just upset him so bad.
Well, I didn't know that either. I'm learning some stuff. You know, interesting thing, you mentioned my dad in the service. You know, his father died in December 1945. He lived 5 years after having a stroke in 1941. He was a world famous chicken breeder by that time. Daddy's draft notice would come up. It would come up. He was trying his best to convince the draft board please not to draft him. He needs to stay back and take care of his family, you know, his mother and in that business. And he finally joined the Merchant Marine in 1943 and served until the end of the war. And then he came back. But anyway, I appreciate you telling me that. Why did it end? Why did the 4th of July barbecue end?
We actually outgrew ourselves. It had gotten so famous and so many folks were coming, and then our work people just dwindled down.
That's
They
right.
were getting old,
That's right.
and it just got where we just couldn't handle it all.
I understand.
It took 2 weeks ahead of time cutting wood, took 2 pup-load trucks of wood to cook that barbecue.
Right.
And then we'd stay up all night and then making the stew and everything. We just wore ourselves down.
I got
There
you.
wasn't enough people left in the community
I
at that
understand
time.
that then things like that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, time moves on. Let me talk about one more thing that I have very fond memories of. My mother and your mother loved to fish.
Oh gosh, yes.
And y'all had 3 ponds, and I'm going to name them as I understood them. The old pond, the new pond, and the lake.
That's right. That's what we still call it.
And so we didn't fish in the lake very much because the best fishing was in the old pond and the new pond.
Yeah.
And we would go to what I understood to be David Green's cabin.
That's right.
Now, why it was David Green's cabin, I don't know, but I never understood why I couldn't go in there. The door was locked, and I would try my best to peep in to see what it looked like. But by that time, it had been somewhat abandoned
Yeah.
for years and years. But I can remember standing on that porch, and there was a little dock that you
Right.
could go out on if you were careful. And some good days.
Yeah.
And
Uncle David fished all the time.
right.
He go to Florida several times a month, I think. But he wanted to build him a little cabin there, and he built a cabin with a bedroom and a kitchen, basically.
Yeah.
He'd come up on the weekends.
Yep.
And all the family that was around that he wanted to, he'd cook fish, and we'd have fish fries. Very good time.
Neat stuff. So let me read on. In the early 1900s, a steam-powered grist mill and gin operated near the railroad between the post office and the store building of Lewis and Ada Brown. Later, Harry Flowers operated the store. That's where you live.
That's where Neil lived.
That's where you live. Highway 96 veered to the left behind Ada Brown's store, crossing the front yard of D.R. Brown, the D.R. Brown house, now owned by Greg and Connie Brown. That's Steve's oldest son and Neil's oldest brother. The store was turned around with the brick facing north, now to the front door of the store and the old front side of the store facing south. So, that's great stuff right there. But we can't leave this conversation without talking about the fair. So it says here that 1957, Howard won second place, $400 for its community exhibit at the Chattahoochee Valley Exposition Fair in Columbus, and first place at the Georgia State Fair in Macon. And that went on for years. How did that come about?
That was another money maker for the community club.
Right.
They started it. Vernon Reddish was the county agent, and he got us hooked up and wanted us to build the exhibits for the fair. And it went on, and then it really took over when Fred got old enough, well, after he graduated from Georgia. Fred was sort of an artist to me, and he had things in his mind that I don't know.
That's true. Steve, I happen to have a 1960 certificate. You know that guy right there?
Yep, that's Fred.
That's Fred Brown.
Yeah.
All right. So he was a junior, 1960. And here's what we want to say. He's passed away now for, I guess, more than almost 20 years.
Yes, 22, I think. So it's 23 or 4 years.
23 or 4 years. Fred was an artist extraordinaire, and it's just something that he was born with. He did not pursue working in the sand business.
No,
And
he had no interest in it.
right, had no interest in it. And so what did he do? Tell me how he became an artist and
Well, he
what
went
happened there.
he went to Columbus College. Well, I don't know if it was Columbus. He called it Cody Road University. But anyway, he went to Columbus College for 2 years, and then he went to the University of Georgia,
Right.
and he graduated, and he started working with the student activities building, and he worked there until he come home back in the 80s. He still did stuff other University of Georgia, like going to the Sunbelt Expo, put
Right.
on exhibits,
Right.
help them. But
Wasn't he a professor too?
I don't think he was ever a professor. They called him professor,
Right.
but he just, like I say, he was an artist, and he went to a different drum than I did.
Yeah, there's differences in families, and I think there's an award named
Yeah.
after him to Georgia.
They've started him and another one of his good friends, or two of his good friends, Tom Cochran. It's not the same Tom Cochran, Taylor County, but they formed what they call the Art Society, which they had about 30 or 40 young Georgia students as ambassadors, more
Mhm.
or less, is what they do.
Mm-hmm.
They went to different events for that the university was going on and represented the university.
Right. So
And
look-
then down the line, after I reckon Fred had done down, formed a scholarship in his name
Right.
that they give yearly to the top students
Sure.
of the Art Society.
And I like to describe what Fred did is investment. So he was making investment in his community, in his county by, I mean, anybody of that age, there might not many people living that remember it, but if you went to the fair in Columbus and Macon, you knew good and well who the Howard community
Yeah, that's right.
because they won first place.
Yeah.
And every year, actually, it says here, we've read that, but Dale Ward on station WMAZ in Macon interviewed Lucy Clark and Claudia Brown about the community fair exhibits. The old tin roof of the church was replaced with shingles in 1957, which is, back to the church. One last part, 1967, the Howard Community Club refurbished the church sanctuary. 1 year later, the central heating and air was installed, new pews, pulpit chairs, and new pulpit altar rail completed the sanctuary renovations. Spinet organ was added. Mabel Brown and Marjorie Watson donated a new piano. My goodness, fond memories of Mabel and Joe.
Yeah.
Mabel played the piano for years and could play it wonderfully. Just good folks, good times.
The proceeds from the fair, all the different fairs is what the
Refurbished the
improvement went
church.
into the church
Right.
mainly.
Right. So let me talk about the church a minute in my family. So when my mother and father moved up here with her parents, Ed and Frony Kilby, I guess you remember
They
them.
came to church.
They came
Yeah.
to church and joined the church. My mother's brother also joined the church, and his name was Lawson Kilby. I don't know if you remember him or ever knew him, but he joined as well, moving their membership from Crowell. But he got killed aboard a ship in 1948.
I don't remember.
Yeah, right.
Him.
You probably never met him, but I read the obituaries, and you may have been a pallbearer at my grandmother's funeral. I think you probably were.
Yeah.
But I remember I was honored and privileged to be a pallbearer at your mother's funeral. And to be able to bear somebody to their grave is a privilege and honor. And I work at the funeral home now with McClayton. I'm retired from public service telephone. And it's such an honor and a privilege to meet families where they are and to help them along. And I just think that is a great privilege. All right, the later years. Your three boys, Greg, Neil, and Daryl. Because Greg and Neil continued in the sand business, and Daryl, like Fred, didn't go that route.
Well, now Daryl
He
started off.
off.
He started off. He went to Columbus College University,
Right,
and with a degree in music.
right,
But he still worked at the sand pit,
sure.
and he was a choir director there in the East Side Methodist Church there in Columbus.
Yep.
Until he got the calling to go to school.
Yep.
So he went to Emory and got his doctorate in ministry.
Right,
And then he has been in a couple of churches in Columbus, and then they sent him all the way down to Guyton, Georgia, and then to Vienna, Georgia.
Right,
Now he's in Americus, Georgia.
right. Doing a very good
Yeah.
job. And that Daryl was called into the ministry. Everybody answers to the calling of what God called them
that's
to
right.
do. And
I remember Marie would tell this story. I don't remember it too much, but she said that I was in the hospital with heart problem or something, and the pastor in the East Side, can't think of his name right now, come in and told Marie, said, I think Daryl's satisfied to be a choir director. And as soon as he left, Daryl come in and called his mama out, and I feel like I gotta go preach.
Yeah.
And that we went from there.
it's interesting. God puts that special calling on a man's
Yeah.
life, and sometimes they fight it.
Yeah.
But you can't fight it. You gotta give in to what God wants. My goodness, so many people have been blessed by
Yeah.
Daryl's ministry. It's great. So
And it's been an awful help that Greg and Neil has stepped in and took over some of the burden that Daryl had out at the pit.
sure, that's right. I remember kind of jumping around here, but as I think I'm gonna ask and talk, but Sunday afternoons was visiting afternoons.
Right.
We used to visit on Sunday afternoons.
That's right.
We didn't watch TV. I remember watching the Brady Bunch for the first time at Carl and Claudia Brown's house. Carl Brown thought that was the neatest thing in the world, how a woman with 3 girls and a man with 3 boys would marry and become one big family. He just thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And we watched it, or we watched Gunsmoke,
Yeah.
and a lot of times Carl Brown would say, let's go to Columbus and eat supper.
Yeah.
And we'd load up in that big green Oldsmobile and we'd go. And I think we went to that, remember that pizza place, Italian place in Cross Country Plaza?
Yes.
The Oreos or something like that.
Something like that.
That's where he liked to go eat because he didn't get Italian food. Where did the name Quidditch come from?
Okay. Sand Company, well, it was a construction company out of Birmingham, Alabama, that moved in here to start the sand business back before 1900. They shipped all the sand. They just dug it out of the ground, sent it straight to Birmingham, and that's what Birmingham was built out of.
Yep.
Anyway, one of the officials of that company was named Carl Widdison. It had become Carl Widdison Brown.
Okay.
And then down the road, we named Daryl Widdison.
Right.
It's an odd name.
It is an odd name, a name I've never heard before, but a very unique name. You're talking about Fred's artistic entrepreneurship. Carl Brown had an artistic entrepreneurship. He moved a train from who knows where to the lake. And I think that's when Fred had started remind me of the name of it.
Crackerland.
Crackerland family. And it became renowned.
Yeah.
I mean, people would come from all over and they would have their wares and their antiques and their stuff that they would sell. And I remember one unique event was, I think Fred had, not Hattie McDaniel, but Chrissy. I don't remember what her name was from Gone with the Wind. She was the last surviving member of Gone with the Wind. He had her there. He just had a knack for having people there.
Yeah.
And he did, and people would come from all over to check that out. So that's good. I think we about covered it, Steve, unless you got something else. But if you would, for me, would you talk about my mom and dad for a minute?
They were very good folks. They're wonderful. The day Dad died, they were the first one to come to the house. And then a couple of days later, I had to go to Butler. When I come by this house here,
That's all right.
I just broke down thinking about all it. Your dad, while we were doing the fairgrounds and all, I was in the Foyers Club, and I raised a sow, had some baby pigs, and I sold them. And I wanted a cow. Your dad went to the Muskogee County Dairy Association. They wanted $150 for the calf, but all I had was $100. And he got them to accept the $100.
No, I didn't know that. Wow.
And then your mom and dad and my mom and dad went to Florida several times, fishing mainly. Daddy didn't fish, but they went.
I wasn't born then, but I certainly remember them talking about it.
Yeah.
And just had a great time.
Yeah. And then in the later years, your dad had a couple of John Deere tractors out there.
Right.
barn.
Right.
Well, I bought them and I got them at the house.
Yep.
I hadn't refurnished them yet, but
Yep.
it's down the road.
I got you.
Hopefully.
And that's good. I appreciate that. But I wanna kind of end this podcast by saying that I hope our viewers understand how rich this is. You know, you say, and I've heard the saying all my life, once you get sand in your shoes, you never get it out.
That's the old saying.
And I believe that to be true.
Yeah.
And wait, before we go, so there has come to Taylor County a world-class golf course, and it has been developed by 5 billionaires, and they're employing a lot of people in Taylor County. But I want our viewers to understand why they came. They didn't come because of the elaborate county or rich folks that live here. They came for two things. They came for sand and water, which we have enough of and plenty of. And they researched the sand. They had geologists and archaeologists study it. It's supposedly the best sand in the world besides the sand in Australia. And the water, you know, we sit on top of, it's got a name, the aquifer.
I know the name, but I can't recall.
And I can't either, but as you're mining sand, you get down to the aquifer, and then water comes up, and we referred to it, y'all told us it was a blue hole.
Yeah.
A blue hole. It was blue. And my daddy said, don't you dare jump in that water. It don't have a bottom. And I guess he was right. So.
Yeah, we have in mining several times we get going down and down and down, and we get to that water table, and there was just so much water coming up that we couldn't pump the sand because we was having to pump that water that's coming out of the ground. We couldn't wash it down with the water gun.
I got
So we had to pull up 15, 20 feet and keep going.
and keep going. Okay.
The water was just boiling up out of that ground.
Neil, you got anything to add?
This is just wonderful. I just, stories that need to be told are being told.
That's right.
We've lost that art of communication.
We have.
Things like this we're not talking about near enough.
That's right.
We need to get back to communication, getting together and talking.
Sure.
Just taking everything for granted.
Having a phone in our hand. Yep. So. Do you ever think you'd see a cell phone?
I can remember years ago I went to a public service phone company after some old telephone poles. And we went, old man,
HC Bond.
HC took me out to show them to me. And he popped up and said, here's a phone, call your house. That's the first time I had ever seen a mobile phone.
Oh, Don. It would be Don then if he popped out a phone. So.
No, it was the old man.
Oh, really?
It was built into the.
I got you. Yeah, a radio mobile
radio.
phone in the truck. That's right. Police cars have. But yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one more question. I understand that the reason we're on Georgia Power is because Georgia Power furnished power to the sand pit. Is that right?
Yes, one of the reasons they built the power came out of Butler in the early 1900s, I think, and went on to Columbus.
Right.
We branched off to do the power for the sand plant. We originally started off having our own big generator, big water tower and a cooler and all that, but it wasn't giving us enough voltage to run, so we had to hook in the Georgia Power. The road from Butler to Howard was dirt, and it followed the railroad track all the way to Howard.
Okay.
It went into Howard between two stores, into the square. In the middle of the square was a water well where the farmers watered mules when they come to town on Saturdays. And then it veered and went on to Columbus. That was in 1933, I think.
Okay.
That they done that.
All right.
It's been a wonderful life, but it still is.
It's been a great life.
You were talking about getting together on Sundays. In the summertime, we all went to Parker's Pond swimming.
Parks Pond, right? Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you was old enough or not.
I was not.
Okay, that was Clifford and Bobby and all that crowd. We'd go
That's right.
to
Who's the oldest? You're Clifford. Same.
Sam about 6 weeks.
Okay. All right. We're talking about Clifford G, our
Yeah.
next door neighbor. So,
I talked to him. He come my Saturday. I was cutting grass and we were talking.
Yep.
It's been a wonderful life, like I
it
say.
sure has. It's been a very blessed life.
Yeah.
We've tried to end this 2 or 3 times, but I keep thinking of something else. But I just want to tell you how much I love you, how much I love your family, and how much I appreciate the investment you've made in me and people in this county, this community, and really this state.
Well, I appreciate that.
It's been a great investment.
It's been, like I say, a wonderful life with all our families working together.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Steve. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.